Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the AP Government Skills webinar presented by the Bill of Rights Institute. We're so happy to have you here to help you prepare for the upcoming AP Gov test. These webinars are designed to help you with the skills. We had a little bit of an issue last night, so we're starting a little early today, and that way we can get through the remainder of Unit 4 and then hit on the skills for Unit 5 political participation. I am your BRI host, Liz Evans. I'm the Regional Programs Manager here at Bill of Rights Institute, and I taught AP Gov for 6 years, so I'm going to be monitoring the chat, answering as many questions as I can, and there's been some really great questions. With me is the ever fabulous, ever wonderful teacher, AP extraordinaire, John Burkowski Jr. from the Academy for Advanced Academics in Miami, Florida, and we're going to waste no time getting started, so take it away, JB.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, BRI. This is episode 10. It's the last episode for the GoPro skills. We're in the end game now. Right? I feel like we've gone through watching all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and now we're here finally. Let's dive in. Before we really get involved here, I want to kind of recap some of the exam components and kind of address a little bit. I do this every episode, but I had a chance to go through the practice app, the digital exam app. So I wanted to add just a little bit more perspective and maybe a little bit more reassurance for all of you. So understand the exam components for both the paper and the digital exam are the same. You have a section 1 multiple choice, you have a section 2 FRQ, times, questions, same. The big differences is no skip and return on the digital exam, no skip and return. But I want to let you know that, especially if you've already gone through the practice exam, or when you do, that when you make an answer choice on the digital exam platform for the multiple choice, on question number one, and you click next, that very, very dangerous blue next button, bottom right corner, a little pop-up's gonna come up and tell you that, look, you cannot skip and return. I'm paraphrasing, of course. You can't skip and return. You cannot go back to the previous question. This is the final warning message. Sure. So that's kind of the digital exam platform telling you, just so you know, just a little reminder, you cannot go back to the previous question. And they do that also in the FRQ section, kind of like, all right, you want to say next, are you cool? Are you sure you want to move on from this FRQ because you cannot go back to it? Give you a little pop-up message. That's nice, very nice. Also, here's a really nice, talk about nice. If you don't answer a question, right, on the multiple choice, if you do not answer, you don't make a choice, and you press next, whether on purpose or by accident, that pop-up message is going to come and be like, hey, you didn't answer the question. There's no guessing penalty, so you sure? And so that little pop-up message helps in case you hit that next button accidentally. And if you hit it on purpose, hey, answer the question. Answer all the questions. Don't do that to yourself, right? Play the odds, right? Do the math. You answer a question, it's a 25% chance you're going to get the point. Do not answer it. You leave it blank. It's a 100% chance you're not getting a point. So there we go. All right. Let's all right, light speed here. We're gonna go through because I'm sorry, all right. I'm sorry. I know this is like, what's going on, Jimmy? What's happening? All right. So here we go. We're finishing unit 4 real quick. Okay, because we didn't have a chance last night. Here we go. So just in case, so if you're playing this and you skip through the beginning, you're like, I thought this was unit 5. What's going on? Just real quick. We're just finishing from unit 4, so we can give it that proper coverage. We were topic 4.7, ideology of political parties, which actually is pretty appropriate for tonight because political parties is going to be a major topic tonight for Unit 5. It is essential that you have a general idea of the ideological positions, the public policy positions of the major parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Also, you might want to get into the Libertarian Party as well, that is listed in the CED. So be mindful of that. So the Democratic Party tends to take more liberal positions, more liberal-minded positions on today's issues. And the Republican Party tends to take conservative issues. This chart here, this comparison, this can give you a good idea of where they stand on the issues, because they may give you scenarios that hit on particular or specific public policy issues. And so you want to get an idea, or maybe even describe, or even identify where the Democratic and Republican Party stand, even where the Libertarian Party may even stand. So it's very mindful they get it. So let's look at a multiple choice question just to give you an idea. All right, which of the following policies would an individual who identifies as a Democrat most likely support? So you have a chance to look over the questions, all right? So we have reducing regulations on Wall Street to stimulate economic growth. Reducing regulations on Wall Street. If you go over here, and this will help you, all right, you kind of see, all right, what are the Democrats? So this just, here. See, support environmental regulations, preserve welfare programs, support equality, decrease defense spending, tax increases on the upper class. Those are consistent with, increasing regulations. Well, you say reducing regulation on Wall Street to stimulate economic growth. Republicans would like that because you see Republican Party wages based on free market, no tax increases, favorite tax cuts to encourage investment. That would stimulate economic growth in regards to reducing regulations. Reduce government regulation of energy-based industries. You see that here in the Republican Party. So that's not going to fly, all right, for a Democrat. Decreasing the role of the federal government. I mean, as soon as you see, you don't have to probably keep reading the question. You see decreasing the role of the federal government. Well, the Democratic Party tends to favor increased government intervention, increased government regulations on, especially on economics, on social welfare. Increasing federal enforcement of immigration laws. That you go back over here, you kind of see where do the Democratic parties and Democratic and the Republican Party stand on that. And then we have strengthening anti-discrimination policies for married gay couples. Okay. Is that something that the Democratic Party would be in favor of? Well, you see here, support equality and affirmative action programs, support same-sex benefits. Ding, ding, ding. And yeah, there we go. So that's an actual question. So you have to have a general idea of where the political parties may stand ideologically on these issues in public policy areas. Okay, cool. Ideology and policy making. These beliefs, right? Where you stand on the issues. Do you believe in strong government intervention in the economy? Do you agree with that we should have regulations on social policies, on regulations on economic policies, on environmental behaviors? Now we're getting into, we're liberal, conservative. So those positions, those beliefs influence how laws are made, the public policy making. And pretty much whoever may be in charge, so who's got the majority in the state legislatures, in Congress, in the House and the Senate, if it's a unified government, that'll make it easier to get these public policies through. Where do the Republican parties stand on this? Where does the Democratic Party stand on this? We already got an idea, right? Republicans tend to be more conservative, Democrats tend to be more liberal. Well, let's look at a question here. A state government places security cameras facing a popular site of protest in a public square in front of its state house. This scenario illustrates, so we have the state government, security cameras, where people would protest or exercise their freedom of assembly, right, their freedom of expression in a public square. And remember that the government is supposed to be limited in how it regulates your freedoms, especially when it comes to expression, assembly. Right in front of a state house, it's a public institution in a public square, it's a public forum. So you have this freedom of expression, but they're putting security cameras in there. And again, the age-old question, individual liberties versus safety and security. How about the answers? How political attitudes quickly shift in the United States? The balance of promoting stability and ensuring civil liberties? Looks like that's our answer, right? There we go. The scenario illustrates that debate. That where do Republicans, and ask yourself this, especially because if you've been watching these episodes, you've been learning in government that liberty and order are very common debates, very common discussions. Where do liberals and where do conservatives stand on this? Where does the Democratic Party and where does the Republican Party stand on Where do libertarians stand on this? Those are major issues. Think about that. Okay. ILG and economic policy. If you're taking AP Macro, this is fantastic. You understand macroeconomic policy, monetary and fiscal policy so much better, and you'll get into the economic theories. Liberals or Democrats tend to be more Keynesian, which involves more direct intervention by the government to stimulate the economy, more consumer spending, more government spending to encourage consumption and investment. Whereas Republicans tend to favor more supply side economics. That doesn't mean laissez-faire, total laissez-faire. It just means that public policies to encourage more private investment that will eventually lead to more economic growth. And a couple of policies that include are cutting taxes, tax reform. And those you want to get those ideas. And of course, here we go. We're doing ideologically. We're also, again, political parties where they stand on this. So let's look at this question. Which of the following illustrates an economic policy most likely, don't forget those key phrases, most likely supported by an ideologically liberal individual? Again, College Board is really showing that you need to understand, you need to know and understand these ideological positions and, of course, where they may stand on in regards to political parties. The Federal Reserve increasing interest rates. That actually depends. Federal Reserve increasing interest rates could be to, it's a regulation in the sense of they're trying to stop a bubble from bursting. They're saying like, we need to slow the economy down. And increasing interest rates also is not very favorable by conservatives or Republicans, because increasing interest rates would certainly not favor investment spending in these corporations to purchase capital equipment to further economic growth. So that's not going to be a good one. Congress increasing the minimum wage. Increasing the minimum wage, government intervention in the economy, it's a safety net program, it's to help to address poverty issues, the working class. That's something an ideologically liberal individual would definitely support. A bill decreasing funding for the food stamp program. No. Conservatives would favor that, but not liberals. State lowering income taxes to attract business. Again, we go back to those supply side policies that I mentioned earlier. Doing that, that's great for a conservative, that's great for a Republican, but for a liberal or for a Democrat, trending wise, they're like, no. We want to lower income taxes, not to necessarily attract businesses, but to lower taxes for low income households, low income families. We want to increase taxes on the rich, the wealthy. That would be where liberals. So understand those positions. All right. Social policy. I know there's a lot going on here. So, but this is actually a very good, you should probably read this, because this is College Board telling you like, hey, by the way, I want you to know and understand. Liberal ideologies tend to think that personal privacy, areas of behavior where government should not intrude, extends further than conservative ideologies do, except in arenas involving religious and educational freedom. All right. Conservative ideologies favor less government involvement to ensure social and economic equality. All right. Now the College Board is telling you. Right? If you're having an issue, it's like, but what do I really need to know? Like, here you go. And libertarian ideology. See, it's explicitly mentioned in the CED. Libertarian ideologies disfavor any government intervention beyond the protection of private property and individual liberty. So be mindful of this. Be able to explain why a libertarian would not favor a particular public policy that regulates economic behavior or free enterprise. Libertarians they want economic liberalism in the sense of they want the government to step back, laissez-faire, limited regulations, basically that the federal government should really just protect private property and free enterprise. Make sure that the free market is free and very limited regulation. Let the free market handle it. That's how we get to the prices. That's how we can determine what consumers and producers will consume and produce. Liberals tend to favor more increased economic intervention and that sort of thing. But that liberty versus order, that's the other issue, right? And you have to be careful. you have to be very careful, because let's talk about that liberally and with political parties. The Second Amendment, that is a freedom, right? The freedom of the right to bear arms for self-defense. Conservatives, Republicans will say yes, and self-defense, we need law and order. Right? Liberals or Democrats want more gun control, so they want to regulate having a gun or acquiring a firearm. But when it comes to First Amendment, right, that freedom of expression, that freedom of press, liberals tend to be like, yes, more of that, government, relax. But the conservatives be like, whoa, hold up. What if this gets in the way with my religious freedom? What if the freedom of expression interferes there? What if the government tries to regulate? You have to be careful where they stand on that. So there are these particular situations. You want to be able to explain that. You want to identify the ideology, you want to identify the public policy, and then describe what's going on there, and then explain why a liberal would probably favor or disfavor that particular policy, that particular, especially in that concept scenario where the government or the Congress is saying we're going to try to pass this bill. Where would a liberal stand on that? You would want to be able to explain that, right? And probably and describe where they would prefer, what they stand for. Okay. Sample concept application. Again, I want to try to be quick with this, but if you go through this question, it deals with the 2016 Republican Party platform. They're talking about the Federal Reserve's monetary policy and the regulation. They're talking about job creation. This affects job creation, upward mobility for workers, equitable prosperity, more transparency. The Federal Reserve should open its books is basically what's going on here. And that is literally in their Republican Party platform. So the prompt here is referencing the scenario, describe an action other than advancing legislation that members of Congress may take to bring to the Federal Reserve. B, in the context of the Republican Party platform, explain how the action to increase transparency and accountability described in Part A would affect the Federal Reserve's ability to make economic policy. And then C, the passage suggests that greater transparency in the Federal Reserve will help workers and create more equitable prosperity for average Americans. Suppose the Democratic Party wants to create a statement about helping workers and reducing inequality in their party platform. Explain how the ideological perspective of the Democratic Party would likely affect how would this address the other economic issues. This is great. This is great. We're building a bridge here between Unit 4 and Unit 5. So let's look at some potential responses. So in using the ACE strategy, which I'll talk about in a few, so that Part A, congressional committees can hold hearings, right, beyond making law, to invite the Board of Governors of Federal Reserve to publicly testify, right? Love the specifics. Congressional committees hold hearings, not just Congress holding hearings, but congressional committees holding hearings. Invite these Board of Governors, publicly testify. Love the word. Do this. This is so essential. You want some skills? Technicalities, specifics, the appropriate diction, very sophisticated government technical lingo in your diction when you develop these responses. Why would this be? The Federal Reserve would be under oath when answering, so they don't want to subject themselves to perjury, especially if they're, they're going to be pretty much forced to, be truthful and not try to lie about anything. So that puts a lot of pressure on them. In Part B, based on that question, the Federal Reserve would be more attentive. What would be the impact of this? What would be more attentive to the political reaction when developing economic policy? Board of Governors would likely recommend monetary policy measures preferred by the majority party in Congress, which could be the Republican Party. And so by recommending policy based on political pressure, Congress would interfere with its intended independence and expertise of regulatory agencies. They may look at an economic situation and say that we should do this based on the economic situation, but the Republican Party in charge of those congressional committees who could invite them and put them on blast, right? Put them publicly in there in front of the media and everything and be like, hey, what's with the story? And so the Federal Reserve may not want that kind of attention. And so they may kind of tweak their monetary policy to kind of get the Republican parties off their back. What about the Democratic Party? Well, they generally promote liberal ideological positions, for identifying, including economic policy concerning the working class, workers. Democrats would support policies favoring labor unions and workers' rights and welfare. Yes, they would. Democratic Party would like to support measures such as increasing minimum wages as a form of improving equitable prosperity among the working class. Close the loop. So see, by knowing and understanding these ideological positions, you're better off in answering these questions, which, as you can see, Could be asked on the day of the exam. All right, cool. We're finished with 4. Let's go to 5 real quick. All right. Quick quick change in the wardrobe. Unit 5, political participation. Political parties, interest groups, the media. And also voting in elections. We don't need to do this. We already did this. All right. All right. Don't forget on the digital exam, SCOTUS FRQ, there is a difference between the paper and digital exam in regards to part A. All right. Ask your teacher, but you can also look at this presentation and get a better idea if you haven't known. At the multiple choice, we're at Unit 5, political participation, 20 to 27%. All right. The Bibles, don't forget the Bibles. Everybody, the Bibles, the CED, which I'll pretty much be quoting a lot, just so you can tell where to concentrate your reviews to be more efficient. And of course, the United States Constitution. By the way, where's political parties in the Constitution? They're not. Okay. What about interest groups? Okay, so media, freedom of the press is kind of sort of. All right. Required foundational documents. Yes, there are those documents that you must know and understand. Don't forget to go to the CED, my webpage, and of course, Bill of Rights Institute and their awesome activities and exercises to understand those primary sources. Don't forget the big 15 of the Supreme Court cases. Got to know them. CED. Don't forget that we've provided the 15 SCOTUS cases and broken down them, categorized them with their clauses and CED topics. The specific factual information. Let's check this out real quick. All right, there's Unit 1, there's Unit 2, still. There's Unit 3, Unit 4, and Unit 5. Whoa, don't forget, maybe there's 207 terms for Unit 5. No. They number based on entirety. Look at Unit 5. What do you got to know? All right, 15, 17, you got to know those amendments anyways, Constitution. But these are the terms that you must know. You have to be able to define them. You have to be able to describe them. You have to be able to classify them, right? Like basically, where would they fall under in the sense of a liberal or conservative category? You have to be able to explain them in connection with other concepts, especially if we're going to build a bridge to another unit. There it is. There's the list. So you got it, right? You can limit your content knowledge to just this. I wouldn't, but yeah, if you want to be efficient, there you go. Okay, so we're gonna go back over to here. All right, let's do this. These are the disciplinary practices, basically what we've been focusing on in these webinars, the skills, concept application, SCOTUS application, data analysis, source analysis, argumentation. Describe and explain are our best keywords. Explain, that's the key to success here. For this unit, I would say concept application, data analysis, source analysis are great. Yes. Could you find it in argumentation? Definitely, especially with elections or how interest groups and political parties who may be more effective or how to explain how they can influence public policy making. Tons of potential with Unit 5 on where these disciplinary practices can handle. But I would say definitely concept application and source analysis would be great practices to focus on Unit 5. Okay. Reasoning process, we kind of hit these already. Definition and classification. Are they? Causation, cause and effect, what's the impact, how did we get here, comparison, similarities, differences. I can come up with one big question. I always love using this question when it comes to Unit 5. What is it, compare the fundamental goals between political parties and interest groups. Great question. Oh, JP, that's interesting. Do they both want to influence public policy making? Yes, but what are their fundamental goals? Political parties want to control power, right? They want to have power. And how do they do that? Elections, nominations, and then elections. And then they will have the power, and then they can push their agenda per their platform. Interest groups, though. Interest groups, what do? Do they do nominations and elections? No. But do they encourage voting in elections? Definitely. But why? So they can get members in Congress, a member in the White House, to then say, let's make a public policy in favor of this interest group who supported us. They want that influence, that direct influence on public policy making to satisfy their interests. Now we see comparison. The task verbs, compare, just we did, right? Remember, be fair when you compare. Be fair when you compare. You notice how I mentioned the political parties, describe them, Gave a little breakdown there, and then did the same thing with interest groups. Got to be fair. Can't leave one hanging. Can't leave one hanging. Define and identify. I know we're going down the list here. Yes, very simple. Describe and explain. Those are key. I would say explain with the how, and the why. So I mentioned this earlier, but ACFRQ, our common strategy when it comes to writing, especially for our briefly explain any or describe these concepts related to one another. And obviously, when you do your argumentation essay, that the body paragraphs, when you have to use evidence and then develop that reasoning to support your thesis, to support your argument, ACE is the place here, right? Answer, identify that claim, make that claim, cite some evidence, and then go and describe relevant characteristics relevant to the question, the task at hand, and then E, this closes the loop. That's what really earns you that point, especially when you have to explain how or why what you claimed and the relevant characteristics that you described answer the question. How or why, right? And these are key. These are key. Why? How? Why? How? Why would an interest group support a particular candidate? Why? Why would this, and here's the other thing, why would this particular interest group support this particular candidate? Why would this interest group encourage its members to vote this party, to vote this particular party? Think of these questions. Think about these questions. Why would this particular group encourage voters to campaign? And then here we go. How about this in regards to how? How would the interest group influence public policy makers to introduce bills that satisfy that interest group? How would they do this? Grassroots campaigning, lobbying, campaign contributions. How? And now we're getting into those very complex questions about why and how. Think about this as you're going through these concepts in Unit 5. Political parties, why? Why would they set this agenda up? Why would this be part of their platform, right? How? How are they going to get power? How are they going to secure a majority in the House, secure a majority in the Senate? How are they going to get the White House? How is that political party going to get particular members on the Supreme Court? Go on and on that, right? How is the media, right? That's the other linkage institution here. How is the media going to cover the presidential election compared to congressional elections? All right. These are the big questions. If you're able to answer those questions, I would say you're going to be very successful on this exam. And that is the word of the day. Linkage. Linkage. We are going to be covering linkage institutions along with voting and elections, because that's the best way that they link. But linkage institutions, political parties, interest groups, and the media. What I love about these linkage institutions is like exactly what they link. What are they linking? They're linking what you learned about in Unit 4, the people, right? Their beliefs, their, how the factors that have basically influenced them to come up to a particular position, right? Unit 1 in a sense because of the people in the government, but also linking the people to the government institutions, what you learned about in Unit 2. Congress, presidency, the bureaucracy, and the judiciary. This is what these three do. These three linkage institutions link the people with the government. They're the bridge. They are that massive bridge between the people and the government institutions. Think of it that way. Let's go. Let's do this. Now, before we dive into the linkage institutions, we got to get into voting and elections. And by the way, all these linkage institutions are going to be, very influential in not just voting, but also in elections. Topic 5.1 deals with voting rights and models of voting behavior. And I want you to visualize that bridge that we did with Unit 4. Unit 4 deals a lot with those factors on eventually what leads to a voter to vote the way they vote, all right? I said voting a lot. That's how we got to the point of like, I figured out who I want to vote for. I figured out how I want to vote, yay or nay, on this particular referendum. Now it's a matter of let's deal with the action of voting and who gets to vote. Who gets to vote? Well, yes, you see there. I'm going to be quoting a lot of the CED because I really want to focus your reviews on this. Describe the voting rights protections in the Constitution and in legislation. Oh, legislation, don't forget, it is not just the Constitution, but the federal government has passed legislation in regards to voting rights. Not to mention, legislation also matters in the state legislatures, because remember, right, we're doing a little bit of review. Who has primary jurisdiction over voting in elections? The states. A little federalism for you. The states. And there are 50 states. And who's in charge of those state legislatures? Is it a unified government under the House and the state Senate? Except for Nebraska, that has a unified. All right. But yeah, that's who's in charge of those state legislatures? Who's in charge of those state governorships? Got to think about that, because they regulate the voting rights, they regulate the elections, and who's in charge, especially when we talk about political parties. That is key factor there. But let's see what the Constitution has to say. So when it comes to voting, you must know the 15th, 17th, 19th, 24th, and 26th Amendments. Those are it's explicit, it's right there. You got to definitely know them. I mean, you got to know them. But you definitely got to know this and what they're right. 15th dealt with that the states cannot deny the right to vote based on race. The 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators. They changed that initially, and better be careful. Initially, the Senate was elected by the state legislature, 17th by the people now. The 19th, not deny the right to vote based on gender, okay, or sex. The 24th Amendment, no poll taxes. No poll taxes, states can't do it. No. And the 26th Amendment can't deny the right to vote based on age, 18 and above. Right? So make sure, and remember, relate to the expansion of opportunities. What could you say? How could you describe this? How could you explain the expansion of voting? Say that the expansion of voting has occurred over time, and that particular individuals, particular groups have been denied the right to vote for categorical reasons. And this is where you can kind of get into the legislation, is that the federal government perhaps involved itself, intervened, kind of, mixed itself in that reserved power of the states over voting in elections and say, well, why? Oh, maybe because the states in some particular regions were denying the right to vote, getting around those constitutional protections. For example, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, poll taxes. And so the federal government had to swoop in and say, let me get that Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's a key piece of legislation that you must know and use potentially, and say, whoa, we got to get around this. This is an equal protection violation. What's going on here? Ooh. Right. So there was an intent there with those state legislations. So we think about that. Think about legislation, not just at the federal level, but at the state level, because of those reserve requirements in regards to voting rights and voting behavior. Right. This is voting behavior. Very important that you understand the examples. So be able to describe the different models of voting behavior. Rational choice, retrospective, prospective, and party line. Right? Rational choice, saying voting based on what is perceived to be in the citizen's individual interest. What I in particular believe, I'm going to vote for me. That makes sense. That makes sense. What is a concern for me? I'm a father. I'm a husband and a father. And I may vote based on who's the best candidate, or what is the best policy. What would be the best kind of law, local, state, that would benefit and secure my role, right, as a father and a husband. I want my wife and I want my sons to be safe and secure today and even tomorrow. Who's going to be that? Is that a rational choice in voting? Of course, absolutely, definitely. So it's not a matter of being selfish. It's like those are influential factors, and so that's something to consider. Why are we talking about this? Well, be careful, because what about political parties? How would they, when they nominate someone, are they keying in on how our voters choose it? Do we have to consider the rational choice? Right? Where do they stand on the platforms? What would be their platform? And so they might have to consider, are there more voters voting on this rational choice? Are there more individual interests? Could interest groups dive in on that? Be like, hey, let me explain why you should vote for this particular person, why you should vote on this law. Remember, it's individual interest. So that individual interest could be commonly, it could be shared, right? They could have something in common with a whole other group of people and say like, hey, this is where we should stand on this. See what we're doing? We're connecting, that explaining. Right? Retrospective voting to decide whether the party candidate in power should be reelected. This gets into incumbency. It's like, I'm gonna go with the incumbent. I think we should stick with what works. All right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? That's the idea. Let's keep going with that. All right. But then voting based on predictions of how a party, prospective voting, how for the future, like maybe we need some new blood. For example, in 2008, the election of 2008 between Obama and McCain, the Republican Party was not doing so high because George W. Bush was in the White House. The recession hit. There was not a lot of support regarding foreign policy because of the Iraq War. And so Americans were saying, do we keep going with this? But then Obama saying, hey, hope and change, right? And the American electorate was like, you know what? Let's go there. Let's give it something to it. We've seen this before. We've seen this plenty of times in these elections of Americans deciding, 1994, the Republican Revolution. Americans saying like, you know what? Maybe 40 to 50 years of Democratic control of Congress. Maybe we need some change. Maybe we spice it up here, all right? Or in 1932, when the Democratic Party took over the White House and Congress overwhelmingly after Republican dominance during the early 20th century. Because Americans were probably saying like, maybe this other party might do a better job, or be more concerned with my interest in what's happening with us today. So there we go. Party line voting. I'm going to vote for the candidate because I am registered for this candidate. I believe in the Republican Party. I believe in the Democratic Party. I believe in the Libertarian Party. I'm going to vote all R's down the line, right? For federal and state and local positions. By the way, local times are a little nonpartisan, right? But yeah, you're just gonna, no matter what, you're just gonna go R's down the line or D's down the line, all right, or libertarian down the line. Yep, that's party line voting. You can do that. That's fine if you're saying like the political party. It's like, man, why would you even do that? See the question, right? Why or how? Why would you even go party line voting? Has the political party assumed a platform that is favorable to your particular ideology? For example, if you're conservative, then it makes sense to vote Republican down the line because the Republican Party platform tends to take conservative positions on issues. Just as if somebody was a Democrat, because probably more than likely because the Democratic Party has assumed positions, liberal positions on these public policy issues. Makes sense. Because now we're connecting those ideological positions with where the party stands, and the political parties are probably saying this is probably how we should write our platform and attract more voters to our party, get them registered with our party, get them to vote down the line, party line voting. I mean, they can encourage that. Vote down the line, vote Democrat down the line, vote Republican down the line, so they can get those seats, so they can get that control and power. Right. Look at the question. If voters are if voters are acting according to the retrospective model of voting, which of the following would be the most important consideration in their decision? The party affiliation of the candidates? No, that'd be more party-like. The campaign promises made by the candidates? The effect of recent economic conditions on the voters? Whether the candidates will act in the best interest of the voters if elected? So remember, voting to decide whether the party candidate in power should be re-elected based on the recent past. All right, the effects of recent economic, so something to consider. All right, 5.2 voter turnout. Now it's a matter of getting people to vote. And this is a general issue. But we have to be careful because there are agendas out there that might say like we want particular voters to vote and at those, so there might be these barriers that are established, and that kind of links to the previous topics there. But you see there, structural barriers, political efficacy, demographics. You go back to Unit 4, and you can know and understand why particular groups may have a high or low voter turnout. And this could be a lot of structural barriers in the demographics. For example, language barriers for Hispanic voters, right? That's one key issue. So again, also working class, low income families, they're more concerned about earning income, and they're working more than one job, and so they may not have the resources, the ability to not only get to the polls, but also have the time to learn about the issues. So there are these life situations that could affect voter turnout, but there also could be legal barriers when it comes to voter turnout. Check it out: national versus state controlled elections, voter registration laws and procedures. One of the big issues, and we actually addressed this briefly in these episodes, was voter ID laws. And that could be an argument to take, assume a position on that, and then at least consider the alternative perspective here. So voters, let's talk about that. Let's look at it ideologically and where the political parties may stand on this. Liberals or Democrats may favor voter registration laws that free it up, right? Very limited barriers. They want all these people to vote. But then conservatives, Republicans may favor voter ID laws because they want to reassure the integrity of the election, that those that are voting are who are properly registered. And that makes sense. So you're getting this debate about, like, well, voting is a fundamental right, so free for all, and don't put these barriers in front of these voters, right? Having a driver's license, you have to pay for that, and some people might say, like, that's like a poll tax, right? Or that the precincts are too far away from voters. Why not add more precincts? Why not that? Why can't we do that? And some might say that, hey, a voter ID law is essential to make sure to confirm that whoever's registered to vote is the one voting. We want to preserve the integrity of the elections. We want to know who is elected, and that we don't have the issue of, was this legitimate? We can confirm that with these voter ID laws. It's again one of those liberty versus order type of situations. Okay, so think about that in regards to the process. Right, election type, midterm, presidential. I'm sure you've learned that midterm elections don't have that much turnout versus presidential elections. It makes sense. I go back to my student and I say, like, all right, who's the president? Or who's running for president? Ooh, I know. And they do. I know, because one person, it's one spot, one seat. All right. Who's running in the midterm elections? There's a midterm election? Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, JB, yeah. So I don't know, but there's all these Congress members and maybe some senators. I mean, what? Yeah, I get it. The media coverage. Oh, by the way, there's a midterm election. Oh. Hey, presidential election! Everybody look! See what I mean? That is the process. All right. Here we go. Political parties. There it is. The functions and impact of political parties. We've already talked about that. Their fundamental goal, that they want to secure power to push their agenda. How are they going to do this? They have to establish this. Here we go. This is the process, right? Mobilization, education of voters. Hey, registered Republicans. Hey, registered Democrats. Read this. Learn about this. Know the issues. Party platform. This is where the party stands on the issues. Got to make it clear. Got to make it simple. Candidate recruitment, got to find the right person. Got to find the right person that will appeal to these particular voters in this particular district, in this particular state, all right, in this particular region, or in these key swing states in the presidential election. Okay, they are designed. This whole idea here is nominating and electing the right kind of candidate in order to secure those votes, get a majority of the votes, a plurality of the votes, so that they can earn more seats in the House, in the Senate, in the White House, so they can control power. All right? That's what it is. There you go. You have to be able to understand that process. What's the fundamental goal? Control government. Assume a majority control of the institutions. How? You were able to answer that question? There you go. Establish a party platform that will attract particular voters, that will attract their ideological issues. All right, make it broad. Make a broad party platform. That's why we have this two-party system. It's a broad party platform. There's so many positions, so many popular positions. And it's easier, right? How why political parties change and adapt. We kind of talked about this, right? Parties have adapted candidate-centered campaigns. It used to be about where do the candidates actually stand on the issues? That's how voters voted back in the day. They was like, where do you stand on this, right? Now it's about character of the candidate. That's why it's candidate-centered. The media could have a lot to do with that. We can kind of mark a turning point with the 1960 presidential election between Kennedy and Nixon. Remember, that was the first televised debates. And we can make an argument that it is there. It is at that point where it became much more candidate-centered, that we're learning more. We are voting or favoring a particular candidate based on how we relate to them. Think about what the television did there. And I know I'm kind of connecting to the media, and that's down the line here, but think about it. The television itself, that medium, what did it do? It brought the candidates into your home. They came into your home. They were on the television, they were live, and they came into your home and they were talking to you. They looked at the camera and they were looking at you. And you saw them in person, you had the visual. Radio, yeah, but you're hearing them. You don't see them. But with the television, you're hearing and seeing them. So there is more, there's more that relationship, that relatability. And now voters are saying, like, I want to know more about this particular person. All right. Like George W. Bush in the election of 2000, he was popular with the average American voter because one of the common phrases is like, he's somebody I would sit down and have a drink with. We could watch football together. That's character. That's candidate-centered. And so what are the parties going to do? Let's maneuver, let's adapt and say, focus on the candidate. What do we know about that? Let's recruit a candidate that appeals to the interests of the voters. Not their public policy issues per se, but can they relate? Can they relate to the person? That's adapting. That's an example of adapting. See how we're doing the skills here. Okay. The structure of parties has been influenced by critical and realignment elections, campaign finance. All right, let's talk. We mentioned that, right? 1932 is that's a great example. My friends, 1932, election of 1932. Go there and use that, learn about it. And in case you had to write about this, in case you had to put this in an FRQ or even an argumentative essay, go there and use that as evidence, as a key realignment election. It's almost perfect. It is probably the perfect realignment election to use regarding how the Democratic Party built this coalition to get that power in response to the Great Depression, and they took over the government at the federal level during the 1930s. And how they appealed and kept building that coalition and dominated for the next 40, 50 years. Because they said, this is who we have to track. We built this broad coalition. And the Republicans, they had to figure out a way to get that. And they did. By 1994, they figured it out. Right? And now that's how parties adapt. Okay. 5.5, third party politics. Okay, you must know how third party politics influence public policy making. This is an old FRQ. And it's actually a very popular one back in the day, before the redesign. You can see here, Ralph Nader, right? He ran on the Green Party platform in 2000, and he says, we've got to put an end to our society's throwaway mentality. And here's a voter, and here you see Green Party votes and thrown in the trash can. So we're doing some source analysis here. So thrown in the trash can. So we have irony here, but really, what are we seeing? What are we looking at? The voter who probably supports Ralph Nader, supports those policy issues. You get into what was the Green Party about? Think about it as a very liberal party, especially more environmentally conscious, but took more liberal positions, strong liberal positions relative to the Democratic Party. But it was a third party or a minor party. And Ralph Nader, he's saying, vote for me. And so it's like, oh, I believe that. But when Why are we throwing it away? Why would it be this throwaway? And why is Nader criticizing it? Because as we understand about third-party politics, is that in a two-party system that has dominated due to what? Evidence. Identify evidence, please. Identify evidence. Why has there been this two-party system? Why has it dominated? Is it perhaps because, and I hope everybody's thinking, say, winner take all in the Electoral College, in these congressional elections, and in getting these districts, it's winner take all. That whoever gets the plurality of the popular vote in a state gets all the electoral votes, no matter what, even if it's less than 50%. Even if it's less than 50%, as long as it's a plurality, you get all of the electoral votes. What if we changed that? What if we did like what Nebraska and Maine did, right? That they base it on the congressional, the popular results in those congressional districts. What if they did that? What if they divided votes, right? The electoral votes like that, like in Maine and Nebraska? Oh, 48 states say nope, it's winner take all. And that makes it extremely difficult for these minor parties or these third parties to make a dent. Right? There's another identification that you could say is JB, ballot access. And this is where we get into states. Like, describe that. How can and explain? Describe and explain. Ballot access. That for these third-party candidates to get their names on the ballots, on these congressional or presidential ballots. Okay, what about that? Well, what do we know about that? That's up to the states. States have these rules and regulations. Remember, they have the reserve powers to control these elections. Yes, that's how you gotta figure out those regs. And maybe the states designed it that way. Maybe they want to keep it simple. But maybe we need to change that. And so you start explaining, it's like that, and you say, how is that a barrier for these third parties? They may not have sufficient numbers, sufficient support. They may not have performed well in previous elections to get their names on those ballots. See what we're doing? See how we are identifying, describing, and now explaining and getting an idea of where this political cartoon is coming from. There we go. See, it's a trigger. These sources can trigger those concepts, right? Okay. And you can just, this is actually practice, great practice. Describe the point of view expressed about minor parties. Probably, in the sense that minor parties, they're probably, I would say, a negative perception of the system or the two-party system, that minor parties do not have much of a chance to score electoral votes or to score victories in congressional elections. Identify and explain how two rules of the United States electoral system. Did we just do that? Did we just do that? Oh my God, we just answered the question. See that? See? Right? And it says minor parties make important contributions to the United States political system in spite of the institutional obstacles to their candidates' success. Describe two of these contributions. We can do this. Let's do this. Describe. That's all I was asking, to describe. All right, practice the task. What have minor parties done? What have third parties done? They can tend to be single issue. They may bring up an issue that is a major concern for the parliament. Their advocacy for it, them campaigning on that issue could influence the voter, could influence the American electorate and say, hey, this is a big deal. We need to concern ourselves with this. And then guess what happens? Right? Guess what happens? All right, let's get more information, more education. Great. That's what the political parties are designed to do, to educate the voter. And then what happens, right? Here comes the major parties. I'll take it from here. Right? I'll take that. It's what happened with the Populist Party in the late 19th century. A lot of issues concerning farmers, and the Democratic Party were like, I see what you're doing. Come with us. And they assimilated their platform. They assimilated their interest and got that farmer vote and built that block of voters and said, we got it. And broadened their coalition, broadened their platform. Kept it simple. The voters are like, do I go with the Republican or go with the Democrat? Hey, how about populist? Oh, there's too many choices. I'm confused. Right? So, all right. Interest groups. Influencing policy making. Interest groups may represent very specific or more general interests, can educate voters and office holders, conduct lobbying, draft legislation, mobilize membership, apply pressure on and work with legislators and government agencies. Like grassroots. That's pretty awesome. The College Board is basically saying like this is what interest groups can do. They just kind of stole my thunder here. It's like what can interest groups do? This. And this is a great way to identify and describe these actions, right? Educate, provide pamphlets, perhaps, conduct lobbying. Ah, yes, wine and dine, lobby and hire these professionals from K Street to lobby these individuals who have the connections, right? Draft legislation. Yeah, that's right. Interest groups can draft legislation. There are plenty of interest groups that they write the law, submit it to the Congress member who then introduces it. Instead of the Congress member saying like, I won't write this, let the interest group write. And the interest group's like, we've done the legwork here. So there you go. Here, just support it. And then we'll support you in the next election. Right? Mobilize membership, grassroots campaign. Members, get out there and campaign, protest. All right. Hang out of the Congress member's office. Right? Emails. Campaign contributions. Or even work with legislators. It can be a positive relationship. But check this out. Don't forget, we talked about this in previous iron triangles, issue networks. The interest groups are a major component of that iron triangle. They work with the congressional committee to perhaps influence the bureaucracy to either increase or decrease regulations per the interest of the interest group, what they want, how they want to exert that influence on the bureaucratic agency. And how, and again, think about it. We'll describe the process. Describe the process. Interest groups have members who vote. The interest group could go to the congressional committee members, right? These legislators who are up for re-election every 2 years or every 6 years, and tell them, we want you to pass laws that will affect the powers of the bureaucratic agency relative to our interests. So why would the congressional committee even listen? Because that interest group has voters, and they will promise that their members will vote for those committee members, those incumbents in the next election. And there you go. That's the process. Describe the process. Okay. All right. Interest groups influencing. Let's look at some of these particular. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do this. So you can see here another source analysis. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the political cartoon? We've seen this before, but just really quick. U.S. senators arrive at work. See they have all these corporations tattooed on their jumpsuits here, and just like NASCAR, they have all the sponsorships. Well, you want to race for those corporations. They want you to win. Well, these senators, the interest groups that are sponsoring them, they want them to vote on these particular issues. They want them to win in getting the bill passed. So, which of the following is the best interpretation of political cartoon? Members of Congress receive political contributions from many special interest groups. Yep. And then we can see here, let's segue here. Which of the following Supreme Court is most related to the topic in the cartoon? For sure, it's Citizens United. Okay. Groups influencing policy issues, single issue groups, competing actors. This kind of goes back to Federalist 10, the idea of competing and coming up with maybe a mutual agreement. So yes, even these interest groups can forge together, right? Form a coalition. And perhaps one great example that I've seen in AP government was interest groups between Black interest groups, women interest groups, targeting Robert Bork, who was a Supreme Court nominee, and their efforts, their grassroots campaigning, them influencing these senators to be against Robert Bork's nomination was effective, and it worked. It worked. He dropped out, and another nominee came, Anthony Kennedy, and the rest is history. So think about that process and those and how to explain that. All right, electing a president. Yes, you have to understand how this electing a president is. The political parties would definitely have a say in this in regards to their nomination process. The interest groups would definitely want to provide campaign contributions and get that particular candidate elected. Here is the process. College Board makes it easy for you. Incumbency advantage. Usually presidents tend to get that second term. That's been a recent phenomenon, relatively speaking. Open and closed primaries, please know them. All right, you don't need to know which state is an open and closed, but you do need to understand how open and closed primaries work, especially in regards to political parties that for closed primaries have to, you must register. And only these particular registered voters can participate in these particular primaries, these closed primaries. Caucuses, party conventions, we talked about nomination conventions, general elections, and of course, the good old electoral college. yes, you must know. We kind of talked about this, right? Like winner take all in Maine and Nebraska. See how we're all the connections, right? Check out the question. Which of the following arguments best support the claim that the Electoral College violates democratic principles? The winner take all system encourages candidates to campaign in every state. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. That would be nice. That would be nice. That would be democratic, but no. Electors are chosen by the voters in each state, which gives parties undue influence over candidate success. Right? But is it violating democratic principle? Smaller states are disproportionately advantaged by the 2 additional electoral votes granted to each state for its senators. And the Electoral College lacks transparency because electors frequently switch their vote during the national convention. That's not going to happen. All right. So the smaller states are disproportionately advantaged by the 2 additional electoral votes granted each state for its senators. Yep, there's that idea of what about the popular vote? There's that argumentation, right? The argumentation is like, should we continue with the Electoral College, or should we amend the Constitution to now have the president nominated by popular vote? Right, something to consider when you develop those arguments. And don't forget the alternative perspective. Why should we continue with the Electoral College if you decided to assume a popular vote? Or let's stick with the Electoral College. Why? Okay. Now, why would the national popular vote be a good idea? Acknowledge that in regards to rebuttal and refutation. We've talked about midterm elections already, so we don't necessarily need to focus too much on this right now, but incumbency advantage, yes, the incumbency is 90 percentile unless there's a realignment election. So again, just what we saw here is also in this particular also applies here to Congress members. But remember the midterm and the presidential elections, general elections every 4 years. Modern campaigns, we kind of got into that about what is the context of our technology that we have to adapt. All right, television, media, social media now, Facebook, Twitter. Those have been influential in elections, especially regarding what about the legitimacy of the information being sent out through social media. This is something that you might want to consider in regards to argumentation about, well, could social media help to facilitate the education of voters? Spread the campaign on this particular individual, especially from the political parties and the interest groups. But then we have to be careful. Is what is being sent out there legit? Is it true? Is it factual? Is it accurate? Are we getting the full picture? So consider that in regards to modern campaigns. So social media would be a key element here. Campaign finance. JP, you have to explain campaign finance. You can, the Bill of Rights Institute is holding webinars regarding content. You can watch those. We don't have the opportunity to get into campaign finance. All right. Is this me kind of getting away from having to explain campaign finance? No, of course not. Absolutely not. No. But campaign finance is like, but focus yourself on what you see here in the CE. All right. Case law, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, the stand by your ad provision. I am blah, 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 and I support this message, or I approve this message. Yeah. Hard money, soft money, and PACs and super PACs. You can see it all here. Yes. But you definitely need to know Citizens United v. FEC. It's been a long time since we've seen a required Supreme Court case, but there it is. And while Citizens United deals with campaign finance in regards to all these technicalities, money is speech. Money is speech. Corporations are people, my friend, in the sense that individual corporations are protected by the Bill of Rights. They have free speech, they have free expression, and money is a form of speech. Money is speech, as per Citizens United. That has been reinforced by Citizens United. It's a Supreme Court case. That is a majority decision. It is the supreme law of the land. Whether there's controversy over this or not and how we stand, the law. Now, can the government regulate? Yes, we have the FEC, Federal Elections Commission. That is an independent regulatory agency about elections, particularly with campaign finance. But they're they're held back by Supreme Court decisions. Buckley v. Vallejo, when we do want to do SCOTUS comparison, I would say that in case, hey, think about it. Maybe a prediction of SCOTUS, all right? Buckley v. Vallejo is a key campaign finance Supreme Court decision that the federal government does have the capability to regulate campaign contributions regarding hard money directly to candidates. There are limits to directly to candidates. However, it also provided precedent for Citizens United in the sense that, hey, how the candidate himself can use however much of their financial resources for their own campaign. Can't deny that because that's their freedom of expression. That's their individual freedom of expression. But a voter, interest group member, they have these limits. Political parties have these limits. Interest groups, they have these limits directly to a candidate. But Citizens United said, oh, no, wait, not directly to a candidate, but on the issues, these super PACs. That's where you can get into the explanation, get into the comparison between a PAC and a super PAC, and get into an argumentation about where the Supreme Court stands on these provisions regarding campaign finance. And the media. I know it's been given major attention in recent years. But yes, the media. You want to understand traditional news media, broadcast television, right? NBC News, CBS News, ABC News. What you see at like 6:30 p.m. usually in the evening. The traditional news media, the press, right? Newspapers, magazines, right? New communication technologies, advances social media like Facebook, Twitter, right? The internets. All right, blogs, okay, the cable news networks get using the internet, having their own websites, their own streaming services, and how to educate. And remember, what is the media's role? What is their linkage? They're designed to keep an eye, right? Keep an eye, right? They're the gatekeeper, the agenda setting, but also keeping an eye on the government, informing the people about what's the government doing, all right? And then, of course, there's the horse race. The horse racing, how the media focuses on those horse race elections, like who, polling all the time. And, as that, you see, explain the media's role as a linkage institution, linking the people to the government, keeping an eye on the government, making sure that people are informed of what the government is using the public's trust and the public's resources and how they're fulfilling their promises to the public and to the people. And if they're within the limits of the Constitution, if they're within the limits of federal statute, are they within the limits of ethics, right? That is the media's job. Has the media been doing its job? Has the media been too focused on trying to get ad revenue? Has it become so consolidated by corporate media that it may not cover certain stories or certain government officials? Maybe they might limit their coverage on that. They might have an agenda themselves, okay? Are they fulfilling their obligation as a linkage institution between the people and the government? And don't forget, the government can use the media as well to link to the people. Government could use the media to be like, we need you to inform the people, advertise this to the people, all right? Disseminate this information to the people. We need you to do that, press. We need you to do that, broadcast news. We need you to do that, social media. Go, send this information. Let's inform the voters. What's going on? What's the update? Here's a new law. Right? Voters, talk to us, tell us, use the media to show us what your issues are. There we go, we're explaining the process. And of course, changing the media, technology, like we really dealt with it. We've already addressed this, the media bias, who owns them, what is their purpose, what is their agenda, like MSNBC has this particular agenda, Fox News has this particular agenda. Where does CNN fall in line? Where does broadcast news? Again, you try to figure this out. Where would a political party kind of spread their information? Which news network would probably favor them? What blog? This is something to consider. They might want to go with a news network, a cable news network that favors their interests or gives them more positive coverage. They might avoid or limit their participation in interviews on particular news networks because the news networks may be more they may have strong interviews. They may put them on record. Whereas they might favor another news network and be like, oh, we might get these softball questions from this particular interviewer. So, you can look at this question here. Which of the following the most accurate explanation of how consumer-driven media increases partisan polarization? This is a great discussion you might want to get into. So using this question, consumer-driven media tends to avoid discussing controversial political topics. I don't know if that increases partisan polarization. Consumer-driven media reinforces existing political biases in individuals. Consumer-driven media relies heavily on corporate advertising. I mean, it does, but is this a matter of increasing partisan polarization? Consumer-driven media is overwhelmingly conservative. Not necessarily. Radio is more conservative. All right. Television tends to be a little bit more liberal, and when you understand this, but I would say that B is our best answer. Consumer-driven media reinforces existing political biases in individuals. Particular news networks could target particular audiences, conservative audiences, Republican audiences, or liberal audiences, or Democratic audiences. And so their stories, their coverage, how they cover, how they ask the questions, what stories they may address, or how deep they get into those stories, and how fair and balanced they are in regards to how they cover those topics. That's something you want to consider when you explain the changing media, especially in recent days. My friends, this was a blast. This was exhausting. We're in the end game. I hope victory for you on the digital or paper exam, whatever you're taking. It's been my pleasure. It's been my honor. Thank you, Bill of Rights Institute. Thank you, Liz, for all your support. Woo! Thank you. I'm done.
We did it. I just want to say a huge thank you to you, JB, because behind the screen here, I have been wildly entertained by your memes and your jokes, laughing out loud to nobody in particular. So thank you so much for everything you've done to make sure that our students are ready for these skills, for this AP test. This will live on the Bill of Rights YouTube page, so that you can go back and just really make sure you're done. So with that, we are going to sign off our skills webinars. Thank you, everyone.